Don't ignore this, your soulmate's secret from the day you met is coming out. Stay with me and don't scroll away, because what you're about to hear isn't comfortable, but it's honest in the way truth always is when it finally steps into the light. If this title pulled you in, it's because something inside you already sensed there was more beneath the surface from the very beginning. Not something dramatic. Not something obvious. Just a quiet feeling you couldn't explain, like the moment you met them carried weight before it carried words. From the first day you met your soulmate, there was a secret. Not a lie meant to hurt you, and not a manipulation designed to trap you. It was something unspoken they carried with them, something they didn't know how to name yet, let alone share. And while you felt the connection instantly, they felt something else alongside it, fear. They recognized you faster than they were ready to admit. That recognition wasn't romantic at first, it was unsettling. You stirred something in them they had learned to keep buried. Old wounds. Old patterns. Old truths about themselves they weren't prepared to face. So instead of meeting the moment with full honesty, they guarded it. You may remember how the connection felt easy, but also oddly restrained. Like there was depth just beneath the surface, but something kept holding it back. You noticed it in pauses. In moments where they almost said something, then changed direction. In the way they opened up emotionally, then pulled away without explanation. That wasn't confusion about you. It was conflict within them. The secret they've been carrying since the day you met is this: they knew the connection mattered more than they were ready for. And instead of stepping into it fully, they chose control. Distance. Timing excuses. Emotional pacing that kept them feeling safe while leaving you unsure. At the time, you may have blamed yourself. Wondered if you misread the depth. Asked yourself whether you imagined the intensity. But the truth is, you were feeling what they were trying not to feel all at once. They sensed that loving you would require change. Not surface-level change, real change. Accountability. Vulnerability. Consistency. And on that first day, even if they didn't consciously think it, their nervous system recognized something their mind hadn't caught up to yet. You were not a casual connection to them. You were a mirror. From the beginning, you reflected back parts of themselves they avoided. The part that wanted more. The part that was tired of running. The part that longed for something real but didn't trust it wouldn't hurt them again. And because they weren't ready to face those parts, they kept a piece of themselves hidden. That hidden piece became the secret. They didn't tell you about the emotional baggage they were still carrying. The unresolved past. The fear of repeating old mistakes. The internal promise they made to themselves never to get that vulnerable again. They didn't tell you how deeply you affected them because admitting that would have meant admitting how much they stood to lose. So instead, they showed up halfway. They gave you enough to feel the connection, but not enough to feel secure. Enough honesty to keep you close, but not enough clarity to let you rest. That imbalance wasn't intentional cruelty, it was self-protection. But self-protection still leaves marks. You felt it in moments when things didn't add up. When their words sounded sincere, but their actions hesitated. When you felt chosen one moment and distant the next. When your intuition kept whispering, "There's more they're not saying." You were right. The secret isn't something scandalous. It's something human. They were not emotionally ready when they met you, and they knew it. They just hoped they could figure it out without losing you. They thought time would soften the truth. That feelings would settle into something manageable. That they could control the depth instead of being pulled into it. What they didn't expect was how persistent the connection would be, even when they tried to suppress it. Because connection like this doesn't disappear when ignored. It waits. Over time, that secret grew heavier. Every moment they didn't speak up. Every time they avoided a deeper conversation. Every time they chose silence over honesty. They felt the distance growing between who they were pretending to be and what they were actually feeling. And now, that distance is closing. Something is shifting in them. The truth they buried is pressing to be acknowledged. They're realizing that the secret they kept didn't protect them, it cost them. It cost them trust. It cost them presence. It cost them the ease that comes from being known fully. They see now how much confusion their silence created for you. How it made you question yourself. How it asked you to carry uncertainty that was never yours to hold. They see the moments you stayed patient, believing in something they weren't brave enough to name. That realization is uncomfortable. And that's why the truth is coming out now, not earlier, not later, but now. Because the weight of holding it has become heavier than the fear of sharing it. You may feel this shift already. A sense that something unresolved is approaching the surface. A feeling that a conversation is coming. A moment of clarity that hasn't happened yet, but feels close. This isn't about them confessing a dramatic secret. It's about them finally being honest about who they were when you met, and who they are becoming now. They want you to know that the distance you felt wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because you were too close to something real they weren't ready to face. You touched parts of their heart they had locked away, and instead of opening the door, they stood guard. That guard is tired now. They're beginning to understand that connection without honesty isn't safety, it's slow erosion. They see how the secret shaped everything that followed. How it created patterns of hesitation. How it kept the relationship in a state of almost. And they're starting to regret not trusting you with the truth sooner. This doesn't automatically mean reconciliation. It doesn't guarantee a future together. But it does mean something important: the truth is no longer being avoided. And when truth comes out, it changes the ground you're standing on. You're not the same person you were when you met them. You've grown. You've learned. You've built boundaries and self-trust. So when this secret finally surfaces, you won't receive it from a place of confusion, you'll receive it from clarity. You'll be able to see it for what it is, an explanation, not an excuse. A truth, not a justification. Something to understand, not something to carry. Whether this revelation brings closure, reconnection, or simply peace, it's arriving because it needs to. Because secrets like this don't dissolve on their own. They surface when growth demands honesty. And you deserve honesty. From the very beginning, you felt something real. That wasn't imagination. That wasn't projection. That was recognition, mutual, even if unevenly expressed. Now, the secret that shaped everything is ready to be spoken. Stay with this. Don't ignore it. Because truth, once revealed, has a way of setting everyone free, even if it arrives later than it should have. This is only the beginning of that moment. Stay with me a little longer, because what happens after a secret begins to surface is never instant clarity. It's slower than that. It arrives in fragments, in half-sentences, in energy shifts you feel before you hear a single word. This is the part where you start recognizing the truth not because it's spoken clearly, but because it finally aligns with everything you've felt all along. Once the secret starts pressing its way out, your soulmate begins to act differently. Not dramatically. Not in some movie scene confession way. It shows up in subtle changes. They linger longer in conversations. They hesitate before pulling away. They seem more present, but also more uneasy, like someone standing at the edge of a decision they can't postpone anymore. You may notice they're more reflective lately. Quieter. Less defensive. Almost as if they're rehearsing something internally. That's because the secret they carried from the beginning isn't just about you, it's about the version of themselves they've been avoiding. From the day you met, they knew they weren't fully available. Emotionally, mentally, or situationally. There were unresolved attachments, unhealed wounds, or unfinished chapters they hadn't closed. They told themselves it didn't matter. That they could compartmentalize. That they could keep the past contained while exploring something new with you. But that's not how the heart works. The heart doesn't stay in neat compartments. It bleeds through cracks. And the more time passed, the more that hidden truth influenced how they treated you. It showed up in inconsistency. In moments where they wanted to move closer, then suddenly needed space. In their inability to fully claim you, even when their feelings were obvious. You felt that push and pull deeply. There were times you sensed they wanted to say something important but stopped themselves. Times when their eyes lingered like they were holding back words. Times when you felt chosen emotionally but not practically. And each time, you told yourself to be patient, to be understanding, to give them time. You didn't realize you were being asked to carry a secret you were never told. That's the part that stings now, not because they were dishonest in a malicious way, but because their silence placed a quiet burden on you. You were left to interpret moods, fill in gaps, and question your own instincts. You were doing emotional labor for a truth you didn't have access to. They see that now. What's coming out isn't just the secret itself, it's the weight of everything it affected. They're beginning to understand that by hiding their internal conflict, they shaped the entire dynamic between you. They unintentionally trained you to doubt yourself instead of trusting what you felt. That realization brings shame. And shame makes honesty terrifying. They're not afraid of losing you as much as they're afraid of being fully seen. Because once they admit the truth, that they were not ready, not healed, not emotionally available, they have to confront the reality that the distance you felt was never imagined. It was real. And it came from them. You, on the other hand, are standing in a very different place now. You're no longer searching for explanations to soothe your pain. You're no longer trying to decode the past. You've already done much of the internal work on your own. You've learned to trust your intuition again. You've stopped blaming yourself for what didn't progress. So when this secret begins to emerge, it doesn't destabilize you. It clarifies you. You may feel a quiet sense of validation. Not in a triumphant way, but in a grounding one. Like finally realizing you weren't wrong for sensing what you sensed. That the confusion wasn't a personal flaw, it was a missing truth. That validation is powerful. It allows you to hold compassion without self-betrayal. You can understand their fear without minimizing your experience. You can acknowledge their growth without rewriting history. And that balance is something you didn't have before. Your soulmate is wrestling with timing now. They know they can't undo the past. They know honesty arriving late still has consequences. They don't know if sharing the truth will bring relief or finality, but they know keeping it hidden is no longer an option. So they're standing at the edge of vulnerability. They're realizing that the secret they carried from the beginning shaped everything, but it doesn't have to define how things end. Whether this leads to a deeper conversation, a moment of closure, or a chance to rebuild, the truth needs to breathe. And when it does, you won't rush to respond. That's another sign of how much you've changed. You won't interrupt with reassurance. You won't immediately soften their discomfort. You won't jump into problem-solving mode. You'll listen. Fully. Calmly. With boundaries intact. Because you know now that understanding doesn't mean absorbing someone else's emotional weight. You'll hear them say things like, "I didn't know how to say it," or "I was scared," or "I didn't want to lose you." And you'll understand those feelings, without letting them erase the impact. You may even feel a strange mix of emotions, sadness for what could have been, relief for what's finally clear, and acceptance for where you are now. Those emotions don't cancel each other out. They coexist. And you let them. You're no longer operating from urgency. You don't need immediate resolution. You don't need to decide everything in one conversation. You're allowed to take time. You're allowed to reflect. You're allowed to feel without committing. That space you give yourself changes everything. Your soulmate may expect an emotional reaction, tears, anger, relief, longing. What they may not expect is your steadiness. Your clarity. Your ability to hold the truth without collapsing into it. That steadiness shows them something important. The secret didn't break you. It taught you. It taught you the cost of silence. It taught you the importance of emotional availability. It taught you how to listen to yourself. And because of that, whatever happens next won't be built on confusion. If the truth opens a door, it will be a new one, not a return to the old dynamic. One built on transparency, accountability, and mutual readiness. Not potential. Not someday. Not hope without action. And if the truth closes a chapter, it will do so gently, with understanding instead of resentment. That's the gift of honesty, even when it arrives late. You don't feel the need to punish them for their fear. You don't feel the need to rescue them from it either. You understand now that everyone meets love from the place they are, and sometimes, that place isn't ready. You're no longer taking responsibility for that. The secret coming out isn't about changing the past. It's about freeing the present. It's about allowing both of you to stop pretending, stop guessing, and stop carrying what doesn't belong to you. You don't need this truth to move forward, but it arrives anyway, because growth demands honesty. And when it does, you meet it as someone who has already found their footing. Not reactive. Not desperate. Not waiting. Just clear. Whatever this truth brings, you are ready, not because you've prepared for every outcome, but because you trust yourself to handle any of them. And that trust is something no secret can take away. Stay with me, because this is the moment where the truth stops being about them and starts landing fully inside you. This is where you feel the weight of everything you've carried finally shift, not because the secret is now clearer, but because you are clearer. And that difference changes how this entire story lives in your body. When the secret finally begins to come out, you realize something quietly profound: you were never crazy for feeling the distance. You were never too sensitive. You were never asking for too much. You were responding to an emotional imbalance you didn't have the language for at the time. And now, with the truth slowly unfolding, all those moments you questioned yourself begin to rearrange in your memory. You think back to the early days. The excitement mixed with hesitation. The chemistry paired with restraint. The way they seemed drawn to you, yet cautious, as if they were holding something back even from themselves. At the time, you interpreted that as depth, complexity, maybe even maturity. You told yourself some people just take longer to open up. What you didn't know then was that they were already managing an internal conflict. They were trying to step into something new with you while still being tethered to something unresolved inside themselves. It wasn't always another person. Sometimes it was an old version of who they were. Sometimes it was fear from past heartbreak. Sometimes it was guilt, shame, or an identity they hadn't yet shed. Whatever it was, it took up emotional space that should have been available to you. And you felt that absence. You felt it when you leaned in emotionally and they hesitated. When you reached for clarity and they offered reassurance instead. When you needed grounding and they gave you ambiguity. None of those moments felt dramatic on their own, but together they created a pattern your nervous system recognized long before your mind did. That pattern shaped you. You became more careful with your words. More patient than you should have been. More willing to wait than was fair to yourself. You tried to be easy because you didn't want to push them away. You adjusted your expectations because you thought love meant flexibility. Now, as the truth surfaces, you see how much you adapted without realizing it. And that realization is heavy, but also freeing. Because it allows you to stop judging your past self harshly. You weren't weak. You were responding to incomplete information. You were loving someone who hadn't fully shown you who they were yet. The secret coming out now doesn't shock you the way you might have expected. It confirms something your intuition has been whispering all along. That sense of, something's not quite right, wasn't anxiety, it was awareness. That awareness is finally being validated. Your soulmate is beginning to articulate what they couldn't before. They're starting to name the fear, the avoidance, the emotional unavailability that existed from the start. They're realizing that what they framed as timing issues or confusion was actually self-protection. They didn't trust themselves to love without losing control. They didn't trust the connection to be safe. They didn't trust that opening up wouldn't cost them something they couldn't afford to lose. So they kept a part of themselves hidden. And in doing so, they asked you, unintentionally, to love them in the dark. That's a painful thing to recognize. Because loving in the dark requires constant guessing. Constant adjusting. Constant emotional labor. And while you were willing to do that for a while, it slowly drained you. It made you doubt your worth, your intuition, your needs. Now, standing here with more truth available, you feel a deep mix of emotions. Compassion for their fear. Sadness for what was lost. Relief for the clarity. And something else too, self-respect. You no longer feel the urge to excuse what hurt you. Understanding their secret doesn't erase its impact. It simply explains it. And explanation is not the same as permission. That distinction matters deeply to you now. You're not angry the way you might have been earlier in your healing. Anger required energy you no longer want to give. Instead, you feel grounded, present, able to hold the truth without it destabilizing you. You also realize that this secret didn't just shape the past, it shaped the pace of the connection, the tone of conversations, the emotional ceiling you kept hitting. And now that you see it clearly, you understand why no amount of patience on your part could have changed things back then. They were not ready to meet you where you stood. That wasn't your failure. As the truth continues to come out, you notice how differently you listen now. You don't rush to reassure them. You don't interrupt their vulnerability with forgiveness. You don't collapse into empathy so quickly that you forget yourself. You let them speak. And in that space, you observe not just what they say, but how they say it. Whether they take responsibility or soften the truth. Whether they acknowledge the impact or focus only on their intention. Whether they recognize your experience or center their discomfort. You're no longer just hearing, you're discerning. That discernment doesn't feel defensive. It feels wise. You understand now that honesty arriving late still matters, but it doesn't automatically reset the clock. It doesn't restore trust instantly. It doesn't guarantee a future. It simply gives you the truth you deserved from the beginning. And you receive it without urgency. You may notice that the secret coming out doesn't make you want to rush back into closeness. Instead, it makes you want to slow down even more. To make sure that whatever happens next, if anything, comes from alignment, not relief. Relief can be misleading. Relief feels good in the moment, but it often pulls people back into familiar patterns. Alignment, on the other hand, feels steady. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand immediate answers. It allows space for observation and choice. You choose alignment now. You also realize that this truth may not lead where you once hoped it would. And strangely, that doesn't devastate you. You've already mourned the version of the connection that never fully existed. You've already let go of the fantasy that honesty alone would have fixed everything. You're not clinging to an outcome anymore. You're grounded in your present self. And your present self knows this. Even if the secret had been revealed earlier, the outcome might not have changed. Because readiness isn't created by honesty alone, it's created by internal work. They are only now beginning to do that work. You don't resent them for that. Everyone arrives at awareness in their own time. But you also don't pause your life to accommodate it. That's the balance you've learned. You are open, but not available at any cost. You are compassionate, but not self-sacrificing. You are listening, but not waiting. The secret coming out doesn't reopen old wounds, it closes them properly. It allows you to see the full picture without filling in gaps with self-blame. And that closure feels clean. You walk away from this truth, not necessarily physically, but emotionally, lighter than you expected. Because now, you don't have to carry confusion anymore. You don't have to wonder if you imagine things. You don't have to keep asking why it didn't work. You know. And knowing gives you peace. Whatever happens next, whether there's a deeper conversation, a gentle goodbye, or a carefully rebuilt connection, it will not be built on silence. You've outgrown that. You stand now in a place of self-trust, grounded clarity, and emotional maturity that doesn't need dramatic endings or perfect resolutions. The secret coming out doesn't change who you are. It confirms who you've become. Stay here with me, because this is the part where the truth finishes unfolding not just in words, but in your nervous system, your memories, and the way you now understand yourself. This is where the secret, once heavy and hidden, no longer belongs to the past alone, it reshapes how you stand in the present. As more of the truth comes into the open, you start to notice something subtle but powerful. You are no longer emotionally leaning toward them while they speak. You're standing upright. Grounded. Listening from a place of stability rather than longing. That shift might be the most important change of all. There was a time when any honesty from them would have felt like oxygen. You would have breathed it in quickly, desperately, grateful for whatever clarity you could get. Now, you breathe slowly. You don't rush the moment. You let it arrive fully, without trying to control what it means. That alone tells you how much you've grown. You realize the secret they carried didn't just shape the relationship, it shaped you. It taught you how to read between lines, how to sense emotional undercurrents, how to become hyper-aware of shifts in tone and energy. At the time, you thought you were becoming more understanding. In reality, you were adapting to inconsistency. That adaptation cost you something. You see now how often you silenced your own discomfort because you didn't have proof. How you felt something was off but talked yourself out of it. How you prioritized harmony over honesty because you didn't want to scare them away. And that's where the sadness lives, not in the secret itself, but in how long you doubted yourself because of it. Now, as the truth comes out more fully, you don't feel vindicated in a loud way. You feel settled. Like a long internal argument has finally ended. Your intuition is no longer on trial. It's been proven trustworthy. That realization is deeply healing. You begin to forgive yourself for staying longer than you should have. For waiting. For hoping. For giving the benefit of the doubt. You understand now that you were responding to love mixed with uncertainty, and uncertainty has a way of confusing even the strongest hearts. You weren't weak. You were human. Your soulmate, in sharing more of the truth, is also confronting their own reflection. They are seeing how the secret they carried shaped not only their behavior, but your experience. They're realizing that by not being honest about their emotional state, they unintentionally asked you to participate in a relationship where the ground was never stable. That realization hurts them. But this time, you don't rush to ease their discomfort. You allow them to sit with it. Because you understand now that growth requires discomfort. And rescuing someone from that discomfort often delays the growth they need. You're not cruel for that. You're respectful, to yourself and to the process. As the conversation deepens, you notice how carefully you choose your words. Not because you're afraid, but because you're intentional. You speak from clarity, not emotion alone. You're not trying to convince them of anything. You're simply naming your experience. And naming your experience feels empowering. You say things like, I felt confused, or I didn't feel secure, or I needed more clarity than I was getting. You don't accuse. You don't dramatize. You don't minimize either. You tell the truth as it lived in your body. And the truth lands. You see it in their reaction, not necessarily in words, but in silence. In the way they absorb what you're saying. In the way they don't rush to defend themselves. In the way they begin to understand that the secret they carried wasn't neutral. It had impact. That moment feels significant. Not because it fixes the past, but because it honors it. You also notice something else: the urge to make a decision immediately isn't there. You're not asking yourself, so what now, in a frantic way. You're not trying to label the future or define the outcome. You're allowing space. Space to feel. Space to reflect. Space to let the truth settle without forcing it to resolve into something neat. That patience is new for you, and it feels healthy. You understand now that closure doesn't always come from answers. Sometimes it comes from alignment. From the feeling that what you know matches what you felt. From the sense that there are no longer pieces missing. You feel whole in that way. The secret, once revealed, loses its power over you. It no longer explains away your pain, it contextualizes it. And that context allows you to stop carrying responsibility for something that was never yours to fix. You didn't cause their fear. You didn't create their avoidance. You didn't fail to love them enough to make them ready. Those truths land gently, but firmly. You also begin to see how much stronger your boundaries are now. You're not afraid of emotional depth, but you're no longer willing to explore it without reciprocity. You don't chase clarity. You expect it. If someone can't meet you there, you don't take it as a challenge. You take it as information. That mindset changes everything. You think about how different this moment would have felt a year ago, or even a few months ago. You would have been flooded with emotion. Torn between hope and hurt. Unsure which voice inside you to trust. Now, there's one clear voice. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It simply says, pay attention. And you do. You pay attention to how you feel after the truth is spoken. Whether you feel lighter or heavier. Whether your body relaxes or tightens. Whether you feel drawn closer or gently pushed toward distance. Those signals guide you more than promises ever could. You're also honest with yourself about something difficult. Even with the truth out in the open, you may not want to continue. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself not to repeat old patterns. That possibility no longer feels like failure. It feels like self-respect. You've learned that loving someone doesn't obligate you to stay. Understanding someone doesn't require you to sacrifice your peace. And closure doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like clarity and a clean emotional ending. You're okay with that now. You're also open to the possibility that this honesty could be the foundation of something new, something slower, more grounded, more transparent. But you're not attached to that outcome. You're not hoping it into existence. You're letting reality reveal itself. That's the most mature place you've ever stood in. The secret coming out doesn't put you back in the past. It brings the past into the light so you don't have to carry it forward unconsciously. And as you move forward, whether with them or without, you do so with your eyes open, your heart intact, and your self-trust fully restored. You don't feel like you've won or lost. You feel like you've learned. You've learned how to listen to yourself. You've learned the cost of silence. You've learned that love requires readiness, not just feeling. And those lessons will shape every connection you enter from here on out. The secret no longer defines the story. Your growth does. And that growth, quiet, grounded, deeply human, is something no past confusion can ever take away from you. Stay with me through this final stretch, because this is where everything gently lands. Not with drama. Not with shock. But with a deep, settling truth that stays with you long after the words stop. This is the part where the secret no longer feels like something being revealed to you, but something being released from you. You notice now that you are no longer waiting for anything else to come out. There's no lingering tension in your chest, no sense that another shoe is about to drop. The story feels complete, not because it ended the way you once hoped, but because it finally makes sense. And meaning, more than happy endings, is what the heart actually needs to rest. You realize that the secret your soulmate carried from the day you met didn't just belong to them. It shaped you, too. It shaped the way you learned to love, to doubt, to wait, to listen. It shaped the way you became more intuitive, more emotionally aware, and eventually more self-protective. It carved wisdom into you, even when it hurt. There's a strange gratitude that shows up now. Not gratitude for the pain, but gratitude for the clarity it produced. Gratitude for the way you didn't harden. Gratitude for the fact that you still believe in honesty, even after being kept in the dark. Gratitude for the way your heart stayed open without staying unguarded forever. You see now that the secret was never meant to break you. It was meant to teach you where your limits are. It was meant to show you the difference between connection and availability, between chemistry and capacity, between love that feels intense and love that feels safe. You didn't know that distinction before. Now you do. And because of that, the version of you standing here today is not someone who would accept the same dynamic again. You're not angry about it. You're simply aware. You know what your nervous system can tolerate now. You know how quickly uncertainty erodes your peace. You know how deeply silence can wound when it replaces honesty. That knowing is not bitterness. It's maturity. You also notice that you don't need an apology the way you once thought you did. Understanding the truth softened something inside you, but it didn't make you dependent on their remorse. Whether they fully articulate their regret or not no longer determines your healing. Your healing already happened. It happened the moment you stopped asking yourself what was wrong with you and started asking what you needed. It happened when you stopped chasing clarity from them and started offering it to yourself. It happened when you chose self-trust over self-doubt. That's why this ending feels quiet instead of painful. You don't feel the urge to rewrite the past anymore. You don't fantasize about how things could have gone differently if only the secret had come out sooner. You understand now that readiness can't be rushed, and honesty can't be forced. People meet truth when they're able to survive it. They weren't able then. You are now. That difference matters. You also feel a sense of release toward them. Not a dramatic letting go, but a gentle unhooking. You no longer feel responsible for their growth, their guilt, or their realization. You don't carry the role of the one who almost was anymore. You are simply someone who was part of their story. And they were part of yours. Nothing more needs to be proven. You might notice that when you think about them now, the feeling is softer. Less sharp. Less charged. There's still respect. Maybe even affection. But there's also distance, and the distance feels right. Healthy. You don't confuse missing someone with needing them anymore. You understand that some connections are meant to change you, not stay with you. Some people come into your life to show you what you deserve by failing to give it. That lesson is painful, but it's also precise. You carry it forward without resentment. You also feel more patient with yourself now. You stop criticizing the timeline of your healing. You stop asking why it took you so long to see what was happening. You understand now that you saw it as soon as you were ready to see it. Awareness always arrives on time. There's compassion in that understanding. You forgive yourself for hoping. You forgive yourself for waiting. You forgive yourself for loving deeply in uncertainty. You don't see those things as mistakes anymore. You see them as proof of your capacity to love. And that capacity is not something to diminish or hide, it's something to protect and offer to someone who can meet it fully. You are no longer afraid that this experience damaged you. It refined you. It taught you how to listen to your body. It taught you how to recognize emotional availability. It taught you how to choose peace without guilt. Those lessons are permanent. As you step away from this chapter, you don't slam the door. You don't burn bridges. You don't erase memories. You simply place the experience where it belongs, in the past, with gratitude for what it taught you and honesty about what it couldn't become. You feel lighter because you're no longer carrying unanswered questions. The secret is no longer whispering in the background of your mind. It has been named, understood, and released. You don't need to revisit it. What stays with you instead is self-trust. You trust yourself to recognize emotional truth sooner next time. You trust yourself to speak up when something feels off. You trust yourself not to stay where honesty is missing. That trust is the real ending of this story. You also trust that the love meant for you won't arrive with secrets that burden you. It won't ask you to be patient with confusion. It won't ask you to guess where you stand. It will be clear, grounded, and emotionally available. And until that love arrives, you are not waiting in emptiness. You are living. Living with a deeper understanding of yourself. Living with boundaries that protect your softness. Living with a heart that is still open, but no longer unguarded. That balance is powerful. As you move forward, you carry this truth quietly: you were never wrong for sensing there was more beneath the surface. You were perceptive. You were attuned. You were responding to something real. Now that the truth has surfaced, you don't need to chase it anymore. You've already integrated it. The secret is no longer something that happened to you. It's something that freed you. And that freedom, calm, grounded, deeply human, is the real gift at the end of this journey.